45. Once again, Gryph faced a fully powered Barrow King, this time without a weapon. Sure, he had throwing knives and a very nice dagger, but against this self-healing, soul-sucking perversion of nature, that was worse than David with his sling. He fired several volleys of flying stalactite at the spectral monster, but the Barrow King set them aside with almost casual waves of his staff. Wick got into the game, tossing several chthonic bolts. One hit the Barrow King in the side, earning an angry snarl that exposed rotten teeth. The Barrow King held his staff in both hands and murmured. A shimmering semicircle of energy pulsed around him, giving off an oily haze, like a polluted puddle in a parking garage. Wick's next several bolts bounced harmlessly off the shield, and the Barrow King floated towards them. "Behind you!" Gryph heard Tifla yell, and he spun just in time to see a dread knight swing a broad-headed axe down at him. The heavy metal blade bit into the stone where it stuck. Gryph kicked the legs out from under the undead warrior, and it hit the ground with a sickening thunk as its head pounded onto the stone of the floor. A living creature would have lost consciousness. Being dead had advantages. The dread knight rose to its knees and wrapped long, skeletal fingers around Gryph's neck. The strength in the dead fingers was incredible, and Gryph could not breathe. He punched up into the dead beast's face. Once, twice, 3 times. The third blow took the knight's jaw off, but apart from a slight dip in health, it seemed not to faze the creature. Debuff added. Suffocation. Well, it isn't drowning, technically, Gryph thought as he continued to punch, each blow having less and less strength as his life faded. As his vision blurred and the colors melded, he noticed a familiar sparkle and moved to the beat of his ever-weakening punches. One last rush of adrenaline cleared his mind enough to realize the sparkle was from his ring, and in his head he laughed. With the last of his life petering away, Gryph pumped as much mana as he could into the ring of air shield. He punched again, but this time he fully sank his fist into the dread knight's mouth. Its rotten teeth bit into his knuckles as his fist punched down the creature's throat. Then he sent the command. The air shield expanded and the dread knight's head exploded. The hands around his throat stopped squeezing, and the air shield blinked. "Oh, not this again," Gryph thought, and he scrambled to the left as the air shield collapsed, raining gore and rotten bits of brain down upon him. He sucked ragged gasps of air into his lungs and coughed. He lay there a few moments, trying to recover. Then he heard Tifla scream. Wick saw Gryph go down, but there wasn't much he could do about it. He now faced the Barrow King alone. His mana was near depleted, and he couldn't spare a single second to chug a potion. He fired the last few chthonic bolts he could muster, and then pulled his summoned swords from their netherworld sheaths. They had a few more minutes of potency before they too would dissipate back to the chthonic realm. Wick spun and ducked, using his superior agility to avoid the Barrow King's attacks, but the Revenant still cowered behind its shield. Wick reached out to summon Avernerius to help, but felt the last of the demon's health disappear. A quick glance showed that at least the demon had collapsed the tunnel. The Barrow King would get no more aid. Tifla was holding her own against one final wounded dread knight. Ovrim was battling the traitor Dirge. Wick realized he was on his own. If he didn't stop, or at least delay, the Barrow King, they were all dead. Then a crazy idea popped into his head. An idea that just might work, but one that would likely end up with him dead. He glanced once more at Tifila and poured waves of love at her. She danced and spun, pulses of white life light shredding the dread knight's health. He smiled grimly and returned his attention to the Barrow King. He got into a fighting stance and then ordered his summoned weapons to blink and disappear. The Barrow King grinned in triumph as it saw Wick's weapons disappear, and it advanced upon him. Wick took a few fearful steps back before forcing himself to stand his ground. Fear ate at his mind as he felt the outer edge of the Revenant's energy field pass over him. He felt stained by a residue of hateful evil and nearly vomited. But he was where he needed to be. The Barrow King reached out with one of his arms and grasped the small gnome by the throat. He hoisted Wick off his feet and brought him close to his face. This close, Wick could see the Barrow King was only partially physical. A human face seemed to phase in and out of existence over desiccated flesh pulled taut along the creature's skull. Wick was seeing the face of the man who had become the Barrow King, and he looked oddly common. Then the Barrow King spoke.
"You are a fool, gnome. I will feast on your soul, and its power will enable me to take the Godhead from your pathetic companion. He does not understand what power he possesses, does he?"
The Barrow King laughed. Wick summoned his short swords and drove them down and into the Barrow King's shoulders. The lich buckled, but did not let go. His hand squeezed Wick's throat tighter, forcing Wick's mouth open. "This isn't going to plan," Wick thought as the Barrow King breathed death into his mouth. Wick's body seized, and he felt energy drain from him. Through his goggles, he could see that it was the same silver color as the energy he'd stolen from the Wormen. That seemed so long ago now. Wick felt his soul leave his body. Then he heard Tifila scream. It was the last sound he heard.